Before electricity reached much of the Tennessee Valley, daily life was shaped by forces few could control. Floods returned year after year. The soil, once productive, was steadily washed away. And across the region, many families found it increasingly difficult to remain on the land. In 1936, this film documented a turning point when one of the most ambitious public efforts in American history began to reshape an entire region.
Two rivers join to form the Tennessee, the Holston and the French Broad. Here's where they meet, just above Knoxville, Tennessee. From this point, it is 652 miles to Paducah, Kentucky, where the Tennessee flows into the Ohio. A number of major tributaries help to drain the 40,600 square miles of the Tennessee watershed, a basin which includes parts of 7 states, There's a rainfall here ranging from 50 to 80 inches a year. These rivers and a myriad of smaller streams tap a richly diversified area. The Tennessee Valley is a fair cross-section of our country. Some problems of other regions are absent here. Others are more acute than elsewhere. But in the main, the problems of the valley are the problems of America. And here comes the outline of the Tennessee Valley, the area in which President Roosevelt asked Congress to establish a demonstration in national planning. Let us examine some of the conditions the President is determined to correct. Of course, such poverty as this is not universal in the valley, but it exists, and all too frequently, not only in the Tennessee Valley, but throughout the length and breadth of our land. Here is regimentation with a vengeance, the regimentation of poverty. Sometimes the outlook becomes so hopeless that men actually abandon their farms. Here is where one did. The principal reason for abandoning farms is soil erosion. Torrential rains cut deep gullies, washing away the soil and destroying the growing power of the land. And floods have taken their toll in human misery, besides destroying millions of dollars in property every year. These are some of the reasons why President Roosevelt asked Congress to create the Tennessee Valley Authority. He had in mind the tremendous national investment lying idle at Muscle Shoals, 2 huge nitrate plants built as wartime emergency measures, and Wilson Dam and powerhouse, begun during the World War, but left virtually idle until the coming of the TVA. He believes that these objectives, when realized, will not only bring about the economic and social well-being of the people living in the valley, but also point the way for similar advances throughout the rest of the country. Actual construction operations start with the building of a cofferdam. These watertight compounds enclose a portion of the river. When they are pumped dry, the workers begin excavating for bedrock. In this cofferdam, a At Norris, excavation is complete and the placing of concrete has begun. A wall is rising here 265 feet high and 210 feet thick at the base. The authority was fortunate in finding a quarry, which you see on the left, of hard dolomite limestone, admirably suited for making concrete. Now let's get up closer to the quarry and show you, from start to finish, a straight-line operation, which converts this hillside into high-grade concrete. First, the soil is sluiced off, much as in placer mining. There's a pressure there of 175 pounds per square inch. Then the drillers move in and prepare the exposed rock for blasting. When everything is ready, the signal is given, the workers leave the quarry, and there he goes. If that big one goes over the edge. No, not quite. And here comes another. Electric shovels move in as soon as the smoke is cleared and start the rock on its way to the crusher. There. That did it. It's a relief to ease that one down. Heavily laden with this all-important dolomite rock, these trucks leave the scene of the blast and wind their way through the quarry to the primary crusher, where the truck tilts and dumps its load into the waiting maw below. Shape and size of rock mean nothing to this crusher. Its job is to reduce everything to stones not over 6 inches through. And it does this with a slight gyratory motion of that spindle in the center there. This crusher is embedded in the hillside, and it drops the crushed stone onto an endless conveyor belt which crosses the Guyana rise to deliver its load to the secondary crusher, standing just between those two conveyor belts. The conveyor in the background comes from the primary crusher on the far hillside. Here the stone is reduced to various sizes, 3 inches and under, and poured onto the lower belt, which takes it to the screening plant. It is sorted into 4 sizes by passing it over these screens. The screens deposit the aggregate in 4 piles under the screening trestle. Underneath these storage piles is a concrete tunnel with electrically operated gates in the roof and a belt conveyor to carry any desired size forward. Stone too fine for the stockpiles is taken over this belt to be cracked into sand in a hammer mill. Then it is screened into 2 sizes and washed free of all impurities. Finally, the sand is carried out on that belt at the left and dumped into storage piles over the recovery tunnel. Meanwhile, cement in bulk is taken from this 6,000-barrel storage tank at the railroad 5 miles away and carried to a similar bin at the dam. The way leads over a heavy-duty concrete highway built by the TVA to transport materials and equipment to the site. The road winds through beautiful wooded hills with the silhouette of the distant Cumberland Mountains beyond. When the dam is complete, the road will cross the crest to form a permanent part of Tennessee's highway system. All these operations come together at the Batcher, beneath which stand 3 concrete mixers, where stone, sand, and cement are turned into concrete. Scales with dials register the weights, and an operator proportions the ingredients. No, not quite enough that time. Better give it a little more. There. That's right. The batch shoots down through this funnel to charge one of the 3 mixers. This plant is electrically timed to deliver 3 cubic yards of fresh concrete every minute. When the mixture is ready, it is poured into gasoline-driven transfer cars, which carry the concrete over the shoulder of the hill to the waiting pit. These buckets hold 6 cubic yards, and there are 2 of them in operation. One of them receives a load every minute and a half, day and night. It will take 1,000,000 cubic yards to complete Norris Dam. That means 166,000 odd buckets full must be swung out into space and deposited. This bucket, now swinging through the air, has historic significance, for it contains the first concrete to be deposited at Norris Dam in July 1934. The two cableways used at Norris Dam are suspended between the head towers high on the west abutment and the tail towers 1,925 feet away across the site. A carriage runs on each cable, from which hangs a block and tackle with a massive hook to lift the concrete buckets or any other heavy object the engineers wish to have moved. An operator in each head tower controls the full operation of his cableway. It is a simple matter for him to raise and lower the hook, to run the carriage out and back, or to move his head and tail tower up or downstream at will. The main cable is anchored securely at each end. Here's a cross-section showing the 175 separate strands of steel wire, which give the cable a breaking strength of 1,100,000 pounds. When Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt visited Norris Dam, she was keenly interested in the operation of the cableway. After inspecting the controls inside the head tower, she went into detail with Chairman Arthur E. Morgan of the Tennessee Valley Authority, who, with his fellow directors, Dr. Harker A. Morgan and David E. Lilienthal, guides the activities of the authority. Mrs. Roosevelt counted herself fortunate in being given a ride out over the site in the man cage, hooked onto the cableway in place of a concrete bucket. A delicate operation in the construction of Norris Dam was the placing of 20-foot steel tubes, known as penstocks, to pass the water through the dam into the turbines. Here they are, attaching both cables to the first section of penstock to be placed. The signalman in the left foreground tells the two cableway operators to take it away. The cables pull taut. Those sections weigh 40 tons apiece, and keeping the two cables exactly in step called for perfect coordination. It's clear of the ground now. It's on its way. And here it is settling into its cradle in the base of the dam. When all sections of both penstocks have been completely laid, concrete will rise around them. And now this shift, which has worked 5.5 hours, is through for the day and is waiting while a new shift piles out of buses. Soon the men you see on the ground will be rolling toward the town of Norris, which serves them as a construction camp. Recreation plays an important part in the lives of Norris Dam workers. The community house contains a reading room and a lending library, as well as facilities for dancing, motion pictures, basketball, and a variety of indoor games. Then there's a post office, a chapel where ministers of various denominations hold services, and a community bank. These dormitories, now housing single workers, are also a permanent part of the town, and here's where the girls who run the cafeteria live. This cafeteria serves 3,300 well-balanced meals a day. Let's go inside. Outdoor work brings these chaps in here feeling good and hungry. There are no frills, but the helpings are generous, And look at the milk bottles. Visitors often comment on the high type of worker employed there. 350 individual houses have been built at Norris, some of brick, some of wood, one of steel, several of stone, and a large number of cinder blocks. While providing necessary houses for married workers, the authority is endeavoring to make a real contribution to the housing problems of America. The use of cinder blocks in home construction has opened new vistas in up-to-date, low-cost housing. Ordinary cinders are mixed with cement and cast into large blocks, easily laid and absolutely termite-proof. Due to the low building costs, it is possible for a man to rent a modern, well-insulated home for from $14.50 to $20.50 a month. Imagine you had only this amount to spend on rent. Could you get a house in your town like this? The authority maintains trade shops at Norris for maintenance and repair work. The shops are also trade schools, where vocational training is offered the workers in their spare time. The trade unions, through the Workers' Council, which any worker is free to join, are backing the training and collaborating in the preparation of courses, and in some cases even initiating new ones. About 2/3 of the force has signed up for one or more courses. The men are acquiring new skills, which will give them an added source of income when they return to their homes. Besides these, there are courses offered in ceramics, natural science, mathematics, poultry raising, dairying, and other subjects. And here are the citizens of Norris in another mood. Ranged on a shady hillside, they watch some of their fellows competing in an impromptu holiday sports meet. Norris knows what all work and no play does to Jack, and to Jill, too, for that matter. At a plant such as Wheeler, power is generated in proportion to the amount of water flowing. When the river is high, much power can be developed. When it is low, little is available. It is during the dry periods that the water stored in Norris Reservoir, several hundred miles away, will be released, generating power up there, and again as it passes each run-of-river plant, such as Wheeler. Now let's get down into that cofferdam and watch the drillers pave the way for a blast which will loosen tons and tons of rock from the riverbed. For this particular blast, 100 holes were drilled. Seldom does anyone, except a construction engineer, have an opportunity to witness operations of this kind so close at hand. Compressed air blows the drilled holes clean. Then comes the dynamite. This man is known as a powder monkey. His job is to insert the electric fuses into sticks of dynamite. It's ticklish work, and calls for a steady hand and plenty of nerve. Then the stick with the fuse in it is lowered into the hole and rammed home. Go easy there, fella. That's dynamite. Sand is poured in and tamped down. And 100 wires led into the central switch. Electric shovels begin clearing up immediately after the blast. The rock is loaded into trucks and rolled away. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army engineers have built a navigation lock on the opposite bank of the river. The lock will have a lift of 53 feet. Sand and gravel for Wheeler Dam is obtained from the riverbed. These buckets bring up aggregate and drop it into a screening plant aboard the dredger, where it is sifted into assorted sizes and poured into separate barges, which are then towed upstream to the Wheeler site and moored alongside the floating cranes and concrete mixers employed on this job. In the absence of rail connections, all material and equipment comes to Wheeler by water from Wilson Dam. A crane lifts great buckets full of gravel and drops the aggregate into a batcher, such as the one at Norris, except that the batcher and the mixer are mounted on a steel barge. When mixed, the concrete is poured into drop-bottom buckets. Another crane swings this bucket out over the cofferdam to the point where the concrete is to be deposited. Forms have been prepared. Steel reinforcing rods are waiting to be embedded in the concrete. Over 600,000 cubic yards will be required to complete Wheeler Dam early in 1936. The bucket deposits its load, and the crane goes back for more. The authorities' latest project is Pickwick Dam, near Shiloh Battlefield in southwestern Tennessee. Before construction could begin, however, exhaustive study of the foundation had to be made, just as at Wheeler and at Norris. This part of the process is known as core drilling. A steel cylinder with a diamond-studded ring attached to the end bores its way 100 feet or more into the bedrock. The cylinder encloses a rock core as it descends. The process is just like coring an apple. Good engineering requires many such disconnected. They cost $2,500 each and wear out after a few months' use. The core is carefully removed and placed in trays, and a notation is made of the depth from which the specimen came. Samples are then shipped to the laboratory for tests and analysis. The core is one of many checks on the stability of foundations. Marsh grass and driftwood make ideal breeding grounds for malaria-carrying mosquitoes. Here on Wilson Lake, TVA patrols cruise along the shoreline, spraying a film of oil upon the water. And when the water is too shallow, a hand pump is resorted to. Where growth is too thick, Paris green combined with an inactive dust is used. This mixture, entirely harmless to man and beast and fish, is deadly to the mosquito. This is one of many ways in which the TVA is cooperating with local authorities. One of the major objectives of the Tennessee Valley Authority Act is the readjustment and use of nitrate plant number 2 at Muscle Shoals to promote the more economical production of plant food or fertilizer. The Act calls for active research in quest of new processes, concentrations, and combinations which will reduce the cost of the essential elements. The most challenging problem today is that of securing sufficient phosphorus. Most soils throughout the world are woefully deficient in this vital plant food element. As a nation, we don't yet realize the tremendous tax on phosphorus which civilization has imposed upon the land. The chief source is the vast accumulated remains of prehistoric animals whose bones have long since gone back into the earth, but whose burden of phosphorus has been processed by nature into phosphate beds such as these in central Tennessee. When no thought is given to the future welfare of the land, phosphate strip mining produces desolation such as this. Under the old system, the topsoil was scraped off, the raw phosphate rock extracted, and the scene abandoned. A proper regard for the land might have caused men to replace the topsoil before moving on. Such badlands will no longer mar the landscape, for the TVA is thinking of the future. Its mining methods will make it impossible for the traveler to tell whether or not the phosphate has been extracted. Phosphate is in such demand throughout this country and the whole world, and the supply is so restricted that it has been deemed advisable to begin reclaiming the phosphorus contained in the secondary beds, more difficult to mine, but often very rich. Phosphorus is the limiting factor in plant food all over the world, and the most important element in soil preservation and rehabilitation. As crops are grown and grains are marketed, or fed to animals which in turn are shipped to market, the natural heritage of phosphorus leaves the land forever. Here's an untouched phosphate bed. If the TVA mines here, you will never be able to tell that the phosphate rock has been extracted. The method is to remove the topsoil and take out the raw phosphate rock, sand, and muck. Later, the topsoil is replaced and the land returned to agriculture. The farmers themselves are mining the rock for the TVA. They will not destroy the land, for to them, phosphate is just another cash crop. But if phosphorus is not made more readily available to American farmers, the growing power of our land will continue to decline. Visualize for a moment the millions and millions of tons of grains and meats which are consumed in the course of a year. Every kernel of grain and every speck of bone which goes to market along with the meat contains phosphorus. Only a pitifully small percentage is ever returned to the soil as fertilizer. The heavy draft upon our natural supply must be restored if our plant and animal life is to be maintained. When the phosphate rock is mined, it is taken by truck to the river's edge and poured down chutes into barges. Here's a good close view of this all-important element. When the barge is full, it is towed to the fertilizer plant, where the rock is transferred to hopper cars and taken to the storage piles. Some phosphate, not readily transported by water, makes the whole journey by rail. Now let's inspect briefly the pilot demonstration plant the TVA has installed at nitrate plant number 2. First, the rock is dried in this kiln dryer. Then it is weighed and mixed in this scale house and placed in storage bins above the electric furnaces. High temperatures convert the phosphorus into a gas. Then it is passed through a scrubber and placed in acid tanks. The pilot manufacturing plant will be adequate for any demonstration in fertilizer production desired. Cheap phosphate is of vital importance in the control of soil erosion. In this field, erosion has already set in. And here's what happens when erosion is left unchecked. The topsoil is gone and the land is destroyed. Millions of acres have already been lost. There is no time to lose. One method of arresting the growth of gullies is the building of a series of check dams, and an extensive program of this nature is already underway. Another method recently worked out by TVA foresters is to spread brush matting over the gully slopes, stake it down with a tangle of wires, and sow grass seed through the matting. Where erosion has barely started, broad terracing will save the land. 50 counties already have their terracing units at work in the valley area, and more are coming in all the time. A terracing crew with tractor and scraper will check the beginnings of erosion at a cost to the farmer of from $1.50 to $2 per acre. The tractor follows the contour lines laid out beforehand by engineers. A broad swath is cut, extending clear across the field. Then a second cut is made, some 20 feet downhill from the first. These two cuts mark the boundaries of the terrace. The beauty of this method lies in the fact that no topsoil is wasted. Crops can be grown up and over each terrace. Since the terrace follows contour lines, the rain is caught and held. 4 cuts complete a terrace, and the fourth and final cut reveals the finished ridge, a stout barrier against the downward rush of torrential rainwater, bent upon the complete and irrevocable destruction of a fertile field. And here's a finished field with 1, 2, 3, 4 broad terraces across it, saving this land for all time. Let's follow this line across the hills to Tupelo, Mississippi, the first city to contract for TVA power. The main street, the courthouse, the city hall, and the mayor and city clerk reviewing figures showing that with power costing an average of 55% less than it formerly did, sales increased 126% in less than a year. Residential users are learning more of the blessings of electricity. Tupelo is not the only city to profit through lower power bills. For instance, in Athens, Alabama, this consumer's last bill under the old rate showed he paid $10.35 for 177 kilowatt hours. And look at his bill for TVA power. Meanwhile, from substations such as this, the Tennessee Valley Authority is pushing lines into rural communities. Thousands of counties in America have never enjoyed the benefits of electricity. Linemen from the Alabama division are bringing with them the medium that will lighten the drudgery of housework and permit wider use of man's greatest natural resource, the power that lies in the might of a river. Now the crossarm swings into place, and the insulator is securely fastened. The line must be tied in firmly so that high winds and winter storms may not interrupt the delivery of cheap TVA kilowatts to farms and homes. The power policy of the Tennessee Valley Authority states clearly that the business of generating and distributing electric energy is a public business. Private and public interests in the business of power are of different kind and quality and should not be confused. The interest of the public in the widest possible use of electricity is superior to any private interest. Where this private interest and this public interest conflict, the public interest must prevail. If this conflict can be reconciled without injury to the public interest, such reconciliation should be made. But the right of a community to own and operate its own electric plant is undeniable. This is one of the measures which the people may properly take to protect themselves against unreasonable rates. But low rates alone are not enough. Through its agency, the Electric Home and Farm Authority, the TVA is making possible a wider use of electricity through a broader use of electric appliances. The Electric Home and Farm Authority does not sell a single appliance, but it cooperates with manufacturers, with retail dealers, and with utilities to bring low-cost, high-grade equipment into homes on long-term payment plans. Electric ranges, electric water heaters, electric pumps, electric refrigerators, and a host of other electric appliances have been mobilized not only to ease human burdens, but to help lift the depression by providing employment for untold thousands of workers in manufacturing plants throughout the land. The meter is installed. Times are changing. New ways are replacing the old. In hundreds of ways, the tireless energy of electric power is wiping out traditional drudgeries. Let us contrast for a moment yesterday with today and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow.
The transformation of the Tennessee Valley was not the result of a single structure, but of a coordinated effort to address the land, the river, and the lives connected to both. Dams were built, power was generated, and new communities emerged, but the deeper impact was measured over time in the stability of the land and the opportunities that followed. Today, the legacy of that effort remains, quietly embedded in the landscape and in the systems that continue to shape daily life.